Well, hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Joe Citizen Show. And we've got a great show for you today. Actually, I think the word is important. We have a very important show for you today. Very serious show, a very necessary show. We have a great special guest. His name is Barry Ramey. He was just recently pardoned by President Trump. And you're going to be very impressed with this young man. And I've got to tell you, look, we're entering an exciting new era, and I believe that anybody that is objectively looking can see that we're starting to win across the board. We're starting to win across the board on all fronts. Hallelujah. And that's because America has, in warp speed, become the shining beacon of light on the hill once again for all the world to see. And, you know, that's how the world wants it. We still have much to overcome, including an entire generation that has been both dumbed down and taught to hate instead of love America. Hopefully, the country's new rapid rise in patriotism will hold us over until the school's new curriculum can have a chance to take effect. Nonetheless, we cannot turn our backs to the serious, egregious stumbles that have jeopardized America's soul and very existence. This is why we must analyze what caused the horrific story of Barry Ramey to occur. Barry was a January 6er, and he has just been pardoned along with 1,600 others by President Trump. The importance is that it's necessary for we Americans to understand just how close we came to becoming a communist-style police state. We must know how close we came so that it can never happen again. My sources of information include some J6 advocates, journalist Lara Logan, and I have anonymous intelligence sources. Now, in 2024, Donald Trump received over 77 million votes. And I think that most people would agree that his voter enthusiasm, the voter enthusiasm for this last election has never been greater in any election. And he received over 77 million votes. But when we recall Joe Biden's basement campaign during COVID with no rallies and a dozen cars coming to a drive-in movie lot, it's pretty understandably difficult to believe that with this lowest of all time voter enthusiasm that Joe Biden had over 81 million votes. So on January 6th, 1 million Trump supporters came to Washington, D.C. in hopes that Vice President Pence would delay the certification until certain voting anomalies were at least looked at. You know, in the martial art form of judo, the art form is to take a bigger, stronger, heavier opponent off stride using his own weight against him. That's exactly what Trump enemies did to the giant crowd of 1 million people on January 6th. Now, Barry Ramey, he's a former January 6th political prisoner pardoned by Donald Trump. He's a staunch supporter of the U.S. Constitution and holds very strong anti-communist views. He, along with all the J6ers, were treated very poorly while incarcerated by a corrupt Department of Justice. But Ramey's spirit was never broken. His love for this country was made even stronger during his 3 years held in federal custody. He now seeks to bring a sense of pride back to the fabric of American people and turn Broward County into a conservative stronghold. You know, every time I speak to this articulate young man, I become more and more impressed with his sincerity and his love of the American dream. Barry Ramey, welcome to the Joe Citizen Show.
Hey, thanks for having me, Roger.
My pleasure. Look, from our fake news, we hear nothing but mischaracterizations about the group, the Proud Boys. And I remember when they first started, I didn't have a bad first impression because I remember when they started and I was going, yeah, finally. Well, the Proud Boys, everything you hear about the Proud Boys, none of them are in fact true. I believe, in fact, that they actually represent the formerly silent majority. Remember the riots in 2020 when Antifa was running rampant with impunity? Nobody was doing a damn thing about it. Well, that is why the Proud Boys came into being. That was their reason for being. Remember when Antifa would go to the University of California at Berkeley and they physically would assault and prevent conservative speakers like Ben Shapiro from speaking? So the Proud Boys, they took it upon themselves to protect these speakers and the freedom of speech. And Barry, do I have that right?
Yes, that's really what brought the fraternity into a place of being and gave us an essence of being, was those First Amendment right infringements on conservative speakers.
Now, folks, if you were to Google Barry Ramey, fake news will give you the false Biden Department of Justice version of what happened. Yes, ultimately, in self-defense, Barry did pepper spray an officer, but it was in a fight he did not start or want. But everything else in the article is a lie. The group was singing the national anthem. They were assuring the officers, hey, we're all on the same side and we're with you and you have no problem with us. Barry, take us through it.
Well, if we're starting at January 6th, I went there like a lot of other people, simply to provide security. During Trump's entire campaigning era through 2015, even to this day, when he holds a rally and he hosts a space for his supporters to gather, there's always a very, very high potential for, we'll call them left-wing radicals. They come out and they lurk in the shadows, and they're opportunistic predators that wait for vulnerable Trump supporters to be alone, to be outnumbered. And a lot of times these are elderly men, elderly women, women with children, and they will seize upon the opportunity to assault them. So the rally on January 6, 2021 would be no different. And I went there to simply protect people from their cars to the rally, back and forth. And if people wanted to show up and assault these Trump supporters, we were the men that got in between that situation from happening.
And folks, we can remember nobody was safe. Senator Paul was coming away from a Trump rally and his own parents came under attack. So, there really wasn't much protection. Now, the FBI, they lied about Barry Ramey. They lied about General Flynn. They lied about January 6th. And here's a clip by Lara Lang. A clip about a lady called Victoria White. You can see a full video by Lara Lang about it, how this woman was just beaten mercilessly for like 20 minutes with a heavy metal baton. She was being jabbed with it, and she was trapped. She was trapped in a tunnel, and she had a concrete wall behind her. She was not exactly a threat to anybody. Let's take a look at that, and let's see what Barry has to say about it.
Were able, by going through the footage second by second, frame by frame, we paired different body cameras from different police officers. It helped show us who exactly was responsible. And I will have to say a special mention for FBI Special Agent Tricia Whitehill, because this is a woman who actually watched the videos, knew what had happened, mentioned that Victoria White tried to stop people from breaking windows. And what does this FBI agent do? She lies. I mean, that's really what she did in her statement of facts, because she talks about Victoria White grabbing the leg of an officer on the ledge. Well, we went to the video at that exact time that she put in her statement. And what is Victoria White doing? She's fighting for her life as she's being assaulted by 4 police officers at the same time. And she's trapped in this crowd. And then she says, as the video progresses, Victoria White has penetrated the phalanx of officers and they're having to fend her off with a baton. That's what she says, fend her off with a baton. I mean, they're cracking this woman's skull, because how Victoria Charity White did not die is still a complete mystery to me.
Folks, I take no pleasure whatsoever in presenting negative things about the FBI. I grew up my whole life loving the FBI, like I bet all of us did. And I really look forward to having that same respect and looking back up to the FBI once again. I just can't wait, and I hope Kash Patel gets in sooner than later. And I'm sure he's going to clean it up. But he's going to need to give the FBI, he's going to need to give them a root canal, right, Barry?
Well, I'm not going to go as far as say that the FBI are communist, okay? but communism has infiltrated every department and every facet of our nation, and the FBI included. I think there is some patriots and very strong America-loving men and women that work in the FBI, but it's time for them to step up and call out what's happening to their organization, because once upon a time, the FBI was a premier law enforcement FBI investigation. But in order to ever get back to that again, and this goes to all of our departments in the United States, communism is a cancer. And if you don't cut it out completely and you leave a little piece of it, it will grow back. So yes, its complete overhaul needs to be performed, or it will come back. And if these good men and women that I know exist in the FBI are still there, you had agents like Stephen Friend and Kyle Seraphin, to name a few, that put their whole careers and even lives on the line to call out the FBI. We need more Stephen Friends and Kyle Seraphins to come forward because they're out there. And so hopefully they now have a platform and a stronger leg to stand on in doing so.
You know, folks, the punchline of this show, unfortunately, is that January 6th was a setup. And that may sound like a conspiracy theory to some of you, but it was a setup. Anyone in the know, everyone with the intelligence, they all say, when I ask my sources, well, do you think it was a setup? Every one of them says, they not only say it, but they say it emphatically, 100%. It was a setup. There was intentional chaos, with violence being its intended consequence, and it was used to flip the story from being a stolen election to an extremist Trump mob. Lara Logan says, quote, January 6th was a lie from day one to cover a stolen election and go after Trump so he could never be chosen by the people again, close quote. And the corrupt system, including courts stacked against any J6 defendant, forced them to plead guilty. Barry, let me show you another clip and then please comment.
Sure.
Our investigations, we believe that the police officers from Capitol Police and MPD and others were set up that day as much as the protesters. This is a typical strategy for information warfare. What they do is they make sure that you set the conditions for chaos by making sure the police are under-equipped and under-resourced, and they know that within that, you're going to get the worst of the worst rising. And yet you have a president who's covering up for a stolen election, and he is trying to give a justification for the Department of Justice, who are still arresting American citizens today for their political beliefs.
Barry?
Oh, she hit it spot on. There's a Capitol Police officer, Tarek Johnson, I believe his name is. And he blew the whistle completely on the very same subject that she just said. They were uninformed of information that was known. They were unequipped with equipment that they had. And I believe it was Captain Sund, I believe he was a sergeant in arms at the time, who tried desperately to get information and plan a strategy for that day with Nancy Pelosi, Muriel Bowser, the mayor of D.C., and was basically denied any access to even have a conversation about doing his job. So you don't have to take the big bad insurrectionists' word for it. Just listen to the police officers from the Capitol Police that have come forward and said, this is exactly what happened to us. Because there are good men and women in there that just wanted to do their job, did not want to hurt anybody, but they were outnumbered and outgunned by officers who were in on the scheme and did want to hurt people.
You know, Barry, when I asked one of my most trusted sources, who I'm not able to reveal, unfortunately, but I asked him, I said, look, is this an indirect byproduct of us not having term limits? And I was thinking in terms of Nancy Pelosi. And he surprised me. He said no. And the reason he said no is he said, because, well, while she had a hand in it, he says that it was the intelligence community who did it. Now,
Absolutely.
folks, I've been saying, Barry, for years that, look, if there were only 26 FBI agents, they would have told us that 4 years ago. I mean, if they would have said 4 years ago, yeah, we had 26 people there. I mean, everybody would have thought, well, that's reasonable, right? But they never did, and they just would not disclose it. And Barry, you have some credible information saying that there were 200 to 400 that I want you to tell us about, of operatives. And bingo, when I heard you say that, I said bingo, because based on their refusal to disclose the numbers of agents that I've been saying literally since then, I thought, well, heck, they might have had as many as 500. Who knows? And yeah, they were 26, quote, agents, but there were operatives, quote unquote, from all sorts of different agencies on the scene, all in conjunction with some of the Capitol Police, and that they were responsible for both inciting and leading the charge. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, Barry, here. While 2,000 to 2,500 people, or 0.0025% of the peaceful crowd entered the Capitol that day, even the left-leaning artificial intelligence admits that only a couple of hundred forced their way in. And my various sources, they tell me that it was staged, because there were at least a quarter of them, at least 25%, or at least 50 of the 200 were various government agency operatives who led the charge. Barry, let me show you this next clip.
Lord, if they didn't want people going to the Capitol, they didn't want people even getting close to the Capitol, it never would have happened. It happened because they wanted to happen.
No one was stopping you.
This is the government we're talking about, okay? Like, they have like nukes and F-15s. They can do whatever they want to stop average people like me.
Had this been covered at all by anyone else in the media?
No. These people are hiding all of this information, and judges have let them get away with that.
Barry?
Well, as this progresses and as it ages, we are starting to see these videos come out. We are starting to see that there was so many anomalies that just simply don't make sense. Just starting with the fact that, the narrative was framed that this was an armed insurrection. Okay. I don't think that people planned on overthrowing the world's most powerful government with keychain pepper sprays and collapsible batons. I think that's absurd. The fact that Donald Trump asked and requested from Nancy Pelosi and Mayor Bowser of DC to have up to 10,000, even more, National Guardsmen come on. Who calls the National Guard to their own coup? I mean, that seems pretty counterproductive. And they didn't want to tell anybody, especially during the sham J6 committees, that Donald Trump had requested National Guard to be there. So why would they hide that information if they weren't trying to frame this in a certain light to produce a certain outcome that they chose? We just recently had, I believe it was from an organization named Stop Hate, and also a gentleman named Tommy Tatum, who was there by Roseanne Boylan, who was beaten to death with a baton, who together have produced and found lots of incredible video footage of officers doing some very strange things. One that I just became familiar with was a Capitol Police officer who, prior to anybody coming anywhere near the Capitol, threw down a loaded magazine in the hallways of Capitol building. He just took a loaded magazine out and tossed it on the ground deliberately and then walks away. Other officers come and see that loaded magazine and just ignore it. And why would somebody do that? Let's ask ourselves, why would somebody do that if it isn't to blame the people that they know are on their way for that action? And how did they know they were on their way? I know that myself, along with none of the Proud Boys, knew anything was going to be taking place at the Capitol. That was a last minute thing that happened, and that we can get into that later and have that discussion. But nobody knew they would be going down to the Capitol. The only people that seemed to know were people that were very questionable individuals. We could talk about Ray Epps the night before January 6th, telling people to go to the Capitol, and citizens standing around him saying that this was a very, for a lack of better words, stupid idea. And it seems like everybody that was encouraging violence or encouraging to go to the Capitol was in some way, shape, or form a confidential human source for the FBI or actually an agent themselves. And that doesn't mean that people didn't go for it and be led to do things and allowed themselves to do things, and they're responsible. But to sit here and pretend like there was a master plan to overthrow the government that day or even stop the certification of the election, is very false. And on that point, we take something like Enrique Tarrio and Ethan Nordine and Joe Biggs and Dominic Pizzola and Zachary Rell. Those were the 5 Proud Boys that were on trial. And they had this chat in Telegram where they used this chat against them to say that they tried to plan for the overthrowing of the government. But they left out key conversations where Enrique Tarrio specifically said, don't go to the Capitol. Don't do anything stupid. Don't fall for this. It could be a trap. They were telling people, don't wear plate carriers and chest protectors. Put a cutting board in it, because people were worried about being stabbed from Antifa, as happened in December the month before. A couple of the Proud Boys were stabbed, including Enrique Tarrio. So all this critical conversation and information it counters every narrative that they try to produce. It was not allowed at the trial. They blocked it from coming into the trial. So that should tell, the citizens what their plan was, based on that action alone.
Can you imagine being a conservative, having a trial in Washington, D.C. when they know that you like Trump?
Yes, I can.
yeah, you can. The audience, though, I bet I can't imagine they can. Furthermore, the crowd was incited by, there are multiple videos, and we're going to watch one, showing flashbangs, rubber bullets, tear gas, and pepper spray being lobbed into seemingly innocent crowds. Take a look at this.
You are going to honor first responders today, but you pardon hundreds of people who assaulted first responders. Why did you do that? You are going to meet with first responders today. Yeah. But you pardon people who assaulted first responders.
No, I pardon people that were assaulted themselves. They were assaulted by our government. I pardoned J6 people who were assaulted by our government. That's who assaulted, and they were treated unfairly. There's never been a group of people in this country, outside of maybe one instance that I can think of, but I won't get into it, that were treated more horribly than the people of J6. So, no, I didn't assault. They didn't assault. They were assaulted. And what I did was a great thing for humanity. They were treated very, very unfairly. There's never been an incident like it.
Barry, isn't it great to have a president that gets it and has your back?
Well, it's great to have a president with testicular fortitude back in the big boy chair. I can tell you that much.
So 1 million people came to the Capitol. 1,600 were arrested. 900 found guilty. 213 convicted of violent offenses. But most of them claimed self-defense, and most of them needed public defenders, because lawyers cost a lot of money. You didn't see a lot of pro bono lawyers come and help you guys like they did the damn terrorists in Gitmo. But nonetheless, most of them needed public defenders as a result. And public defenders going against government prosecutors, well, that's like Little Leaguers going against the Yankees. It's not very fair. In Washington, D.C., 92% voted for Biden. And these people hated all things Trump. And the Washington, D.C. jury pool was wholly biased. And most people simply gave up and agreed to plead guilty because they knew they didn't have a chance. So I asked my intelligence sources, I said, look, after you factor in how many had to plead guilty versus going against the deep pockets of the federal government and the extreme bias of the Washington, D.C. jury pools, how many actually were violent and not simply defending themselves? And out of the 213 convicted as violent, all of my sources, all of them had the same answer. About 20. 20. So in other words, after this 4-year-long dog and pony J6 committee show that hired some NBC producer to come in and stage it as some type of mini-series to destroy Trump, not to mention the 1,600 other lives, it turns out that this violent mob that we've all been hearing about 24/7 for the last 4 years was a complete ruse, because it turns out that out of the 1 million people that showed up, only 0.00002% were of the violent variety, that they had been telling you about 24/7. Once again, that's 0.00002%. Barry, how's my math?
Oh, it's pretty on point. Another thing to go back to what you said was that, a lot of these men and women, they needed to retain public defenders because the astronomical costs of getting a lawyer, especially in the federal system, is substantially high. Not to mention that the federal government has a 98% conviction rate, where they're going to get the conviction one way or the other. And these public defenders who work in DC, in order to keep their job or to actually be allowed to do their job, they are sleeping with the enemy. They are practically working with the prosecutor. They're having private conversations behind their clients' backs with the prosecutor. And like you mentioned, this is a very politicized event. These public defenders were not on our side, even by ideology standards. They were completely against us. The news in local DC just pumped January 6th footage in a negative light that all these people in that district saw on a constant basis. And so they looked at us as absolute, terrorists. And so to ask these people that have been force-fed this narrative to come now and defend you or be a fair juror at your trial it's impossible. It's absolutely impossible.
Yeah, folks, they treated these January 6ers that were patriots and by far mostly peaceful. They treated them like terrorists. And the terrorists at Guantanamo Bay, they built soccer fields for. And that SOB, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, the mastermind of 9/11, he's still running around breathing air. Now, it's very important for America. It's very important for we Americans to understand just how badly America behaved during these 4 years. And we were, in effect, a police state, which would have exponentially worsened had Harris won. Now, under Biden, for the 4 years, 2020 through 2024, America was headed straight to becoming a communist police state. Solitary confinement was used to torture J6ers, and worse, without speedy trial. In some cases, years. These pretrial defendants, in many cases, were housed with general criminal populations, which they're not supposed to be, lack of visitations, constant movements to numerous jails, lack of proper food, medical attention. This was far more consistent with being a police state than being America. So finally, pardoned by Trump, Barry Ramey, he's rebuilding a new life with a standing legal debt after almost 3 years of virtual torture under Biden. During the 16 months before the trial, he was shipped to 12 different facilities. On 8 of these occasions, his wrists and legs were shackled and chained on these 14 to 18-hour bus rides. There were no visits for 9 months and then none again for another 8 months. He was denied medical care for a back injury. He was put in solitary confinement for 2.5 months. He was stabbed in the face. He was denied bail twice despite no criminal record. His mail was withheld for 4 weeks at a time, and he was denied current newspapers. His prosecutor argued for a 9.5-year sentence, while he was sentenced to 5 years in federal prison. Now, while serving time in FCI institution in Miami, he was labeled as a terrorist and treated as such, despite no terrorist charges and no criminal history. A few months later, he's thrown into solitary confinement. No phones, the commissary and visitation taken away for 60 days. Then they had a brawl take place between gangs at FCI in Miami, who he should not have been housed with. The commissary's damaged, it had mold, all the inmates were back on lockdown, confined to their cells with no air conditioning, not very pleasant in Miami. The phones kept going down, sometimes for 3 weeks at a time. And, Barry, not everyone is as strong as you, and some did not survive. Matthew Perna committed suicide. His family said he died of a broken heart. Victoria White was almost beaten to death. Ashley Babbitt, well, she was shot dead by Lieutenant Michael Byrd of the U.S. Capitol Police. Protester Roseanne Boyland was beaten and did die in the chaos outside of the Capitol building tunnel. And Mark Roderick also committed suicide. Barry, let me show you this next clip, and then you give us your reaction.
I believe in my nephew. I am proud of him. He was just larger than life.
We wanted to come and kind of just share what really happened today.
He had never been in trouble before in his life, so this was just so overwhelming. I was sitting in my home, and I got a call from his uncle.
What did he say?
They robbed him of his hope, his will to live. They took his fight away from him.
They broke him.
They completely broke him, and they broke his heart.
34-year-old Roseanne Boyland was one of 4 people killed.
This was a woman who got pushed down, smothered, trampled, and then beaten.
We paired different body cameras from different police officers, and you see Victoria Charity White having the holy living hell beaten out of her. She's fighting for her life as she's being assaulted by 4 police officers at the same time, and she's trapped in this crowd. I mean, they're cracking this woman's skull. It was a crime against her. And in that same tunnel, within an hour or two, Roseanne Boyland was beaten by another police officer, Lila Morris, and she died. So you have one woman, Victoria White, who should have died, and you have another woman, Roseanne Boyland, who actually did die, and yet you have a president who's covering up for a stolen election, and he is trying to give a justification for the Department of Justice, who are still arresting American citizens today for their political beliefs. How many billions of dollars have these lies cost the American people? Investigating Russia collusion, which we know that it was a political operation by Hillary Clinton and the DNC and her allies. And not only that, but January 6th and all the other things that have happened in between. We are really being taken for a ride as American citizens, and we are responsible for continuing to allow them to slit our throats. Their mission statement is to make sure that nobody hears our voices, that we all live in our bubbles, and that we are isolated so we can be divided and destroyed.
Barry, how could this have happened in America?
Well, no matter which way you splice it, this is how communists have behaved throughout history. And we have 100,000 examples throughout our history in the world to point to say this is identical to what has happened in the past. Now, when we talk about Roseanne Boyland and Ashley Babbitt and Matthew Perna and the other gentlemen that died of heart attacks there at the scene on January 6th, let's not forget that the Biden administration, Hakeem Jeffries, Nancy Pelosi, to this very moment, will look into a camera on mainstream media and tell you that 5 Capitol police officers were killed that day. That's is right. A blatant lie. It never happened. And they're still saying it to you to this day.
He's absolutely right, ladies and gentlemen. And I was going to get to that. They will just look you in the... That should tell you something, ladies and gentlemen. They have that little respect for you and for your intelligence that they can just spew complete lies. You can look it up for yourself. Even the left-leaning artificial intelligence will tell you this. What Barry Ramey just told you is absolutely 100% correct. They still use the same lies, just like they did about Charlottesville. They go on, they say the same things over and over again. It doesn't matter if they're debunked. They are such low lives that they will just scrape up whatever sewage they can just because it sounds good. It doesn't matter to them whether it's true or not. You know, one of my sources for today's show includes January 6th advocate and author of The American Gulag, Tim Rivers. I did the interview last year on the JoeCitizenShow.com, and it was finally just now, like literally days ago, approved by YouTube after a year. So the interview on JoeCitizenShow.com, it was posted on Rumble all of this time. My guess is, had Trump not won the election, YouTube would still not have approved the interview. And as Barry said, despite the ongoing lies by the left to this day, zero 0 Capitol Police were killed by any of the protesters. Even the left-wing artificial intelligence will corroborate that. However, sadly, 2 protesters as well as 2 Capitol Police committed suicide after the J6 event. Now, clearly, Nancy Pelosi turned down President Trump's offer for 10,000 National Guard because she wanted this to happen. The unlocking of the magnetic locking system for the Capitol building. But Barry, can this be corroborated?
I don't know if Nancy Pelosi directly had made that order, but the order was made to unlock the doors. And we can look at the video. A lot of those doors have magnetic locks. They were open for people to walk through. On top of that, you can see there's a video out there where a gentleman dressed up as a Trump supporter who clearly knows his way around the Capitol building. There's a hidden door that nobody knows about except for law enforcement that will allow law enforcement to go from one hallway to the next. It's a hidden door. And he comes out of it and then goes back inside of it while nobody has even gotten to the building yet. And he's already in there dressed up as a Trump supporter. So what does that say? And that video is out there to be corroborated with what I just spoke upon. So there's all kinds of nefarious things. There's a reason why they didn't want to release the CCTV footage from inside the Capitol, because every time we get a small portion of it, we're able to see that the narrative that was spun is completely absurd, and more of their lies and cover up are being exposed with every bit of analyzation of the video. So I can guarantee common sense will tell you that the more video that we get our hands on and are able to analyze, the more we're going to see that this was a reverse coup. It was not what they told us it was. And I mean, even just the selection of the sham J6 committee should tell you everything you need to know. You know, that they're force feeding you a narrative, and everything they're telling you has been lies, from the 5 police officers killed to Donald Trump, you know, saying peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard. You know, all these things that they've left out from telling we the people what happened that day and the events leading up to is not accurate. I mean, look at the pipe bomber. Now we know that this was a on-duty Capitol police officer that put those pipe bombs down there. We know this now. It has come out. The congressmen have released the information. What else is there? How much more is there? Because everything they have told us about the events that day has been a lie.
You know, that was my next statement. I was going to say we never learned more about the pipe bombs planted on J6, and you're saying that there is solid information that shows that?
Yes, I believe it was Clay Higgins and Loudermilk that have now produced more information about that. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that a Capitol police officer has come forward and blew the whistle. While I was in D.C. jail in USP Lewisburg pretrial, Lewisburg is a penitentiary in Pennsylvania State. We discovered that there was an Antifa operative that was amongst us by the name of Josiah Kenyon. We took him in as one of ours for over a year, only to find out that when his FBI debriefing was made public, that he was a pro-communism affiliate of Antifa who went there. And these are his words in his FBI debriefing, which transcripts are now public, that he went there in hopes of getting Trump supporters enticed to being shot. And how this individual that's very low on the totem pole of the organization Antifa, how he knew that something would be taking place when overwhelming majority of Trump supporters had no idea anything would be happening at the Capitol that day. How he was able to get that intelligence is the real question. But I worked with Jim Hoft and the Gateway Pundit to expose this along with some other J6ers. And, you know, again, his entire FBI debriefing is public. They can read it in his own words, what he told the FBI his goal was and who he was affiliated with.
Barry, are you confident that more and more will come out now that the tapes are allegedly released?
With this administration, 100%. I believe with Pam Bondi, Kash Patel, and, you know, the big bad orange man, God, I love him, with them at the helms of the wheel. Yeah, I do believe we're going to finally get the truth. The question is, how far can we get it out to middle America and the norms out there that don't really pay attention closely to what's going on? How far? Because that's the problem with untrue propaganda, especially from the tongues of communists, is that it's so potent. And I don't know who made this quote, but it definitely wasn't me, that a lie can make it around the world twice before the truth gets up and puts its shoes on. And they have been force-fed this narrative for so long. I mean, you look at the Russia hoax, you still have people that absolutely believe that Donald Trump was colluding with Russia, even though we now know it was a Hillary Clinton paid-for dossier and it was all bogus. It was a lie. And there's people that just don't know any better. There's still people that believe 5 Capitol police officers were killed by January 6ers that day. And there's almost nothing you can do to convince them otherwise. You know, I read somewhere, and I believe it true, you know, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. Or you can lead a liberal to truth, but you can't make it think. And that's a problem that we're going to be having.
Well, you've got it exactly right, Barry. Millions of people don't know or don't want to know that the whole Russia thing was completely bogus. Robert Mueller, who we were told is, he's such a straight shooter. He knew that Trump was innocent for a year before he released the report. And America doesn't seem to know that Hillary, who just goes out in the circuit, has a drink, and goes out and shoots her mouth off on these shows. The whole Russia, that Trump's a spy. She tried to take down a sitting president, accusing him of being a spy for Russia. She cooked the whole damn thing up. And this is documented. That is squarely documented, ladies and gentlemen. And you know, it's just scary to think that the media could brainwash everyone into hating Big Orange Man, and that once they did that, then their folks just got away with doing anything they wanted. Anything went. Anything at all, including destroying the United States of America. And go ahead, Barry.
One of the key elements of communism is that, and they're one of their principled philosophies that they will never get rid of, is whatever they're guilty of or they know that they're doing, they will accuse the other side first, even before the information comes out. So if you ever hear a communist saying that guy's doing bad, no, they're doing that. They're right now as they speak.
Well, the Democrats have been doing that for 10 years, so I guess we know what their playbook is. You know, ladies and gentlemen, this show, it really couldn't be more important. And the moral of this story, sadly, is that the Biden police state vindictively, maliciously, and knowingly went after American citizens, specifically Trump and his supporters, who they considered not to be American citizens, but rather the enemy. They went after parents at school board meetings who disagreed with gender books and gender affirmation. They went after pro-lifers, women in their late 70s who were against abortions. They went after anyone who questioned the 2020 election. And if you want to believe Biden got 81 million votes, go right ahead, be my guest. And they staged a large-scale reality show on January 6th, and they tried to make it into a television show. The continued punishment and harassment for Barry as a political prisoner at the hands of the DOJ was relentless. They tried to break him down, like they did others, by using mental torture while serving his time in federal prison. Everything from threats, the solitary confinement, the mail being denied, medical treatment, et cetera, et cetera. You know, when a person is sentenced to prison, their punishment is supposed to be going to prison. All of the extra things that were done to Barry Ramey and the J6ers is unlike anything America has ever seen before. Never in our nation's history have we seen political prosecutions that have occurred under Biden's Department of Justice like we have for President Trump and his supporters. It is critically important for America to understand how badly America behaved during these 4 years. And we were, in fact, a police state, which would have exponentially worsened had Harris won. Barry Ramey, in time, America will learn to thank you for stepping up on their behalf, for doing what most people are unwilling to do, and for stepping up on behalf of all the people who didn't even realize that they needed you to do so. Barry, what would you like to tell America before we leave?
Well, whatever your thoughts about January 6th are, the events that occurred that day, I'm for one, I have made, I didn't act appropriately at times, but if you look at what Google will tell you and you look what the mainstream media tells you, they tell you the point of whatever alleged mistake was made. They don't want to tell you the hours, leading up to that, what happened, or the moments leading up to that, what happened. In my situation, where I did get into a scuffle with a Capitol police officer, and I did launch a squirt of pepper spray in that direction. They don't want to tell you about the 15 minutes prior where we were singing the national anthem and rubber munitions were being fired upon us. Flashbangs and concussion grenades were being lobbed at our head. Elderly people were being shoved to the ground for no reason whatsoever. And then the fight ensued. They don't want to tell you that the 5 officers that they alleged were killed that day was a total lie. They're continuing to lie to you. And you don't have to take my word for it. You can look online now. You can find these videos. I do recommend a website called stophate.com who has put together raw, unedited footage for you to make your own opinion about. And I highly recommend visiting that website and looking at this from a critical standpoint, because we can never let anything like this happen again. And that goes for both sides, the Trump supporters and the general public. We can never let this happen again. And the last thing I'd like to touch on is we were given a opportunity by God himself. And if you don't believe that, then you need to go back to Butner, PA, where the hand of God intervened while Trump was on stage and spared his life. And because this man should be dead. And on that day, God intervened in our affairs here in America. And if we do not get involved in the 2025 primaries and the 2026 election and the midterms and the next election 4 years from now, if we do not get involved and show up like we the people showed up on November 5th, this opportunity that we have from God is gone. It's over. It's all for nothing. We have Republicans and Democrats that are both on the side of not having the American people in their interest. Both parties are complacent, and I make no recommendation over one or the other. Although now I am a registered Republican, that's mainly due to closed primaries in Florida. I am an American first on the political spectrum. I am for any politician that puts America and Americans first. I am an anti-communist. I'm against Marxism and the indoctrination of our children in our schools. And I encourage Americans to take a very hostile stance, politically speaking, towards any Republican that will go against an America First agenda, because there's nothing wrong with an America First agenda other than politicians not being able to get rich off the backs of the American people any longer, because it puts us first. And I encourage every American to get involved in their local school boards, get involved and become an activist in your city council and your mayor and electing your judges, and get off the couch the day the primaries are and get out there and vote, because conservative Americans have a very, very low turnout when it comes to local elections. These communist Marxist Democrats will walk across fire and broken glass to vote for whatever blue-haired crazy person that wants to teach your 6-year-old about transgenderism. They will go and vote for them through lakes of fire, while we sit home every single primary and do nothing because something better happens to come up. Well, there's nothing better than right now. And it is time, America, to get involved and become an activist with politics.
Barry, you are a force. We need your voice, Barry. We really do. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to close the show with a clip from my music variety show from 2003, God Bless the USA, which I performed every show after 9/11. I've never shown this on my show, but it's my humble honor to dedicate this to you, Mr. Barry Ramey.
From the lakes of Minnesota to the hills of Tennessee, across the plains of Texas, from sea to shining sea, from Detroit down to Houston, New York to LA, there's pride in every American heart, and it's time to stand and say that I'm proud to be an American, but at least I know I'm free, and I won't forget the men who died, who gave that right to me. I gladly stand up next to you and defend us till today. 'Cause I'm proud to be an American, but at least I know I'm free. And I won't forget the men who died, who gave that right to me. I gladly stand up next to you and defend us till today. 'Cause there ain't no doubt we love this land. God bless the
Oh, yes, ladies and gentlemen, the multi-talented and
Thank you so much,
Mr.
Mr. Barry
Homefield.
Ramey.